Hi everyone, Stepan here. In today's video I have one of very famous positions played by Tigran Petrosian. Hopefully you don't know it. I mean, maybe you have seen it, maybe you haven't. Okay, this is Petrosian versus Nunn, played in the Great Hastings tournament in '77. It's white to play. You can see the rules on the screen. I don't know, if you're familiar with Petrosian's games, this may be easy, but even if you see the first part, you need to calculate deeper and see why what you are thinking of works and what the important features of the position are. Okay, enough of the introduction. Pause the video, find the correct way for white to continue this position. See you in a minute. Okay, so what's going on here? John Nunn, who was a great player in every aspect of the game, but probably most famous for his attacking genius and attacking ideas and fearlessness, has sacrificed a pawn in the opening, actually, and he got two things out of it. He got this monstrous bishop on the long diagonal. He also got this 3-on-2 pawn majority on the queen side, which in conjunction with the bishop on g7 can be very, very scary. Obviously, white's king is still in the center, so white doesn't really have an easy way to prevent those pawns from rolling forward. The second thing black got is that this weakness on b2, which cannot really be defended. If you try to play a passive move like rook to b1, trying to tempt black to make a mistake, black doesn't have to make a mistake. Hopefully you did calculate black's best response here. It's very important that you saw this. Otherwise, in a real game, you could be just thinking, oh, rook b1, that's great. No, black doesn't have to take the pawn. If black takes the pawn with the bishop, he is probably lost after queen c2. And bishop to g7, takes on b5, and that's about it. Black can probably just resign. If after rook to b1, black takes the pawn with the rook, again, this fails because rook b2, bishop to b2, bishop to b5, developing with tempo, and again, black can almost resign. Now, why is this position so bad for black, you may ask? Well, white is still a pawn up, but that's not as important. In this position, there's a great issue in black's position, and that's the fact that the queenside pieces haven't been developed yet. So black doesn't really have time to do stuff like that. So after rook b1, black has a great way to punish this mistake. He doesn't have to take the pawn. He can simply play queen to a5. And queen to a5 defends the b5 pawn, threatens the a2 pawn, and whatever white does now, there's no easy way to defend his position. I don't know what to suggest. Let's see what the engine suggests. Okay, the engine says bishop to d3, which I don't know. I mean, queen takes a2. Rook a1 obviously fails to queen b2. So, yeah. So rook b1, not a good move. What else can you do? Well, you can try d6, but that's too slow. Trying to go for counterplay in this position doesn't really work. Black can take on b2 straight away, but bishop g4 is even stronger, defended by the queen on d1, and after bishop e2 takes. Now the knight is pinned to the queen, white castles, and black has this very, very dangerous pawn majority, which probably would be decisive. What else can you do? If you play bishop to e2, then rook takes b2, justifying black's play. Great position. Now, coming back to the starting position, there is one more issue for black here, apart from the fact that his queenside pieces haven't been developed and apart from the fact that he's a pawn down. This rook is misplaced. If the b2 pawn falls, then the rook is amazing on b2. If the b2 pawn survives, then the rook is useless because it really has no good squares to go to. So, what Petrosian did, exploited all three weaknesses in the black, the one major strength and the two weaknesses in the black position. How can you exploit the undeveloped queenside pieces, the awkwardly placed rook, and the amazing bishop on g7? Well, the only way to do it is to play the move pawn to b3, giving up the exchange. And this idea is ingenious, but this idea was easy to see. The follow-up and everything that's going on was a bit harder to understand. Firstly, because this pawn is also loose. Okay, taking the pawn immediately would not be as good because white has ideas like this and the rook is sort of trapped. So not taking the exchange would, well, give white a perfect position. So the only move we have to look at is bishop a1, queen a1. Okay, and queen takes pawn. Now the material is equal. However, black has lost his biggest strength in this position and he has kept his two weaknesses. Furthermore, the weakness of the misplaced b4 rook has been highlighted so much that this rook actually has no useful squares. And another tactical weakness has been created. By this capture, queen takes d5, black has lined himself up for a bishop f3 winning idea. And this position now became very hard for black to play. Black is not lost, black is still okay, but he has to play perfectly. And obviously white has two great bishops, a lead in development, a safer king. Black had lost his best piece, and yeah. Petrosian continues a3, which is very sensible. This rook has no squares, basically. The best was still to take on b3, but John Nunn played rook to g4. Let's just see what happens on rook takes b3. If rook takes b3, that's better than rook g4. White can choose to take straight away, but he doesn't have to. I think a trickier move is bishop to e2. And now your rook is attacked, and if you play a normal move like bishop b7, then you lose straight away to bishop f3. You move the queen, I take your rook, I take your bishop, everything falls apart. So after bishop e2, the only move is actually rook to d3. And there's no other way to save yourself, which seems weird. I would suggest that you analyze this position further. If, for example, bishop to f3, then queen d8 is very strong, and now you probably have to play queen c1, because if you take, then black is the one with the initiative, and you could actually be in major trouble after rook d2, bishop g4, and stuff like that. Also, after rook takes b3, white can still just take. That's fine. Knight takes b3, queen takes b3, taking back the exchange and just continue bishop to e2, threatening bishop f3. It should still be slightly better for white with the bishop pair and the lead in development and the better king, but black does have this pawn majority which white is going to have to deal with. Okay, but in the game rook g4 was played, and now this is a much simpler position to play for white than after taking on b3. Bishop e2 played, and now if you try to save your rook with rook g5, then bishop f3 and you resign. So after bishop e2, John Nunn simply continued knight c6, sorting out the long diagonal. Bishop f3 played, tempo on the queen, defending on g2. The queen dropped back to e6, and now bishop g4, queen g4, and castles, and that's about it. A perfect position. Now it's not even easy to create a passed pawn because everything's defended and the b3 pawn is still on the board. White's king is safer, black doesn't have the only important defender to his king. Again, the position is not lost, but John Nunn lost it because it's simply better for white, and because Petrosian was such a great technician that he almost never gave up advantages like this one. Okay, let's continue with the second position. This is a thing of beauty. I was so happy when I solved this. Okay, a study by Pavlenko, probably, well, I just love his studies. Okay, it's white to play. Concentrate, look for hidden resources, calculate until the end. It's very important that you calculate until the end. If you stop halfway through, okay, pause the video. Look for moves for white. Good luck, see you in a minute. Okay, let's have a look at this position first. What's going on? Well, black is threatening to queen in one move. That's sort of a problem. White has a bishop and knight for that, but winning this position when black is trying to queen is not easy. there are only two sensible moves to start with. We have to discard knight d2 straight away because of c3. Either queening the f pawn or queening the c pawn. So that doesn't work. Excuse me. The most obvious move, knight to h2, is a blunder. And you'd probably spend some time calculating this move before you saw why it's a blunder. It took me ages to find it. It took me ages to find the drawing idea for black. When I did, everything else was easy. So you have to hope that in a real game you'd find that idea before playing knight h2. I did when I was analyzing, but maybe in a real game I would have just played knight h2, depending on how much time I had. And the winning idea, the drawing idea, excuse me, for black is giving up all the material for stalemate. So one thing we can see with certainty is that if the white bishop was on this diagonal and all three pawns were gone, that would be stalemate. So in positions like this, you have to think about stalemate. Okay, so let's see how black draws. First, you have to give up your most awkward pawn. And this is the key move. You play c6. Any other move, and white simply wins. For example, you play c3, I go bishop e4, and now it's not stalemate. I'm going to take this guy, and you're going to resign. Okay, but after c6, white is forced to take, because if he doesn't take, I'm playing c3, c2 equals, c1 equals queen. So you have to take. And now after bishop c6, c3, white has to play either bishop a4 or bishop e4. Doesn't really matter, the bishop is going to end up on this diagonal. Let's say bishop e4, c2, bishop takes c2, f1 queen, check, have to take it, stalemate. It's a draw. The king has nowhere to go. So, the most obvious move simply fails. It's a drawn position. So what else can we do? The only other sensible move, which was much harder for me to see, but I was forced to find it because knight h2 didn't work, is knight to g5. And this is just incredible. So, after knight g5, black queens with check, which seems absurd to allow this. So f1 equals queen, check. Now, you have two options. The most logical one, again, fails. So hopefully you'd discarded knight f7 check. Why does this fail? Well, let's see. After queen takes f7, okay, which has to be taken, otherwise checkmate, king takes f7, black has the same resource again, c6. And again, if you don't take it, I'm going to play c3, c2, c1 equals queen. So you have to take it, and I just play c3. You play bishop e4 again, I play c2. If you don't do anything, I'm going to queen, and again, stalemate. So, after knight g5, f1 equals queen, the winning idea is extraordinary. This is just beautiful. The idea is bishop to f3. Blocking the check and threatening knight f7 again. But this time you cannot take the knight. So there's nothing to do. Let's say queen to d3, which at least prevents white from mating with this diagonal. You can also play queen b1. All other moves lead to mate. The sequence is now fairly easy. If you saw bishop f3, then you definitely saw the continuation. Knight f7, king h7, bishop e4, queen e4, knight g5, king g6, knight takes, king f5, and knight to c3. And this pawn is now rolling forward. I was so happy that I managed to do it. Again, it took me too much time. But positions like this, solving positions like this is helpful. Trust me, it's going to help you win weird, complicated endgames in over-the-board tournaments. Okay, I hope you liked the two positions I got for you today. Let me know what you think and stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.